one wave that I think is just not so much the specifically about AI, but it's more like physical world. So
Uh,
data center is one wave. I think the next big wave that's coming, that's industrial wave, is energy and infrastructure. So like, when I think about construction, I'm just thinking about it. Okay, we're building a lot of data centers, but like the next big wave that's coming now is like new, nuclear reactors, new massive energy sources that could be deployed quickly, and how we can generate energy, how we can deliver energy quickly.
My guest today built one of the top 50 iPhone apps in the world. 2 million users, no marketing team, no sales team. He was a Stanford PhD student at the time. Then came Google, then Microsoft, then a decision most of his peers probably couldn't understand. He left big tech to fix one of the most manual, paper-driven workflows in construction, procurement. Today, his company is processing more than $1.3 billion in annual purchase volume and quietly helping power the data center boom. This is Eldar Sadikov, co-founder and CEO of Field Materials. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Buildings 2.0, presented by Integrated Projects. I'm your host, Jose Cruz Jr. Today, I'm sitting down with Eldar Sadikov. He's the co-founder and CEO of Field Materials. He's a Stanford-trained AI researcher, Google, Microsoft, and he's moved into the space of procurement in construction. Why'd you do that? Why'd you move into construction?
Why construction? Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, who would have imagined that I'd be in construction? Somebody told me, 10 years ago. But the interesting fact about me is that I come from a family of construction people. So like my father is a civil engineer and ran a pretty sizable general contracting business, self-performing general contractor. And my mother has been, she's now retired, my dad, but she's been a controller and CFO her whole life working for construction companies. And so I come from a family of construction people. So that's kind of my personal connection. And the second reason why I ended up in this is because of my partner, Victor. So my co-founder, Victor Gain, comes from civil engineering, just like yourself in early career, Jose, you were an architect. He was in architecture design side of things and designed a lot of high rises, a lot of towers, and he's a civil engineer by training. And he's the one that approached me a few years back. This was 2021, saying that procurement is sort of seems to be broken, like in a sense that he was looking at it from the standpoint of the designer, like a architect. He's like, we spec out a lot of different materials, different like even, what facade has to be made of, what sort of like structurally how the building should be. And then when the building actually is built, so much of it ends up changing. And it's so hard to trace it back to the like, why did it end up like that? Even though we have specs, we have submittals, we have all of these things, you go from the design side to the general contractor side, from GC, you go to the subs, and so many things can change and interchange throughout this process. And what Victor realized at the time is that it's so not traceable because the process is so paper-based and sort of like spreadsheet-based and so manual between the design side of things, the GC side of things, the subs, that it's hard to trace, and so like that's made him realize that we can, there is an opportunity to automate things. There is an opportunity to really, really streamline things when it comes to procurement. And we started looking at this in 2021. And me as a serial founder, as someone that built a company prior to this, I looked at it and like, wow, this is amazing, because you have construction, which is, multi-trillion-dollar industry, and procurement and materials represent easily 30, even up to 40% of all costs. And it's all running on kind of pen and paper and spreadsheets, like very manual processes, emails being exchanged back and forth. And there is no digital, way to automate or trace all these things. And I got excited about it. And because of my family background, I was like, let's work on it. I want to commit, my next, whatever it takes, 10 years of my life, 12 years of my life to this problem, because I really want to solve this. And that's how I ended up working on it. I mean, I'm excited, and I've been enjoying it. It's been now it's going to be 5 years soon.
Wow. Wow. So walk me through this. So AI procurement for construction, what does that mean? And how are you kind of inserting yourself into this messy, what seems to be like a pretty undigitized or just like really clunky process?
Yeah. So the main the best way to describe our platform is we're basically building AI agents that can automate the procurement operations. So, what do I mean by procurement operations? Procurement in general is messy because it involves a lot of manual steps. Like it starts many times. Yes, you have the specs and, and maybe you have submittals, but a lot of times the actual operations of procurement looks like this. A field person, like a foreman, realizes that he needs XYZ materials. He goes and texts, or calls the office saying, I need this materials. Or sometimes he even like fills out a paper form saying, I need this materials. It goes to the office. The office then goes and says, okay, we probably need to get it from a few suppliers. They might get some quotes. And then they have to go and set up a purchase order and say, hey, we're going to buy this from this supplier, Ferguson, for example, if we're talking about plumbing. Then they set up a purchase order. Someone has to actually enter that information into the accounting software. So you went from paper form to a quote potentially that gets emailed back, then to someone entering this information into the accounting software. And that's just the first step. Then the material starts getting shipped. The material gets shipped. Someone at the job or at the warehouse, depending on where the material goes, has to go and get that delivery ticket, check off and say, yes, we received this, 10 of this, but 20 is still missing. And then, a lot of times the order could come in 10, 20 different shipments, and everyone, someone has to go and actually track this. And a lot of times it's paper. And then, at best, you're going to have a spreadsheet that's on someone's computer that tracks like, okay, this is how many is still back ordered. This is how many we received. And the final step is the invoice. Someone gets the invoice. AP team downloads that invoice from the inbox. Sometimes they even print it. They go to the project manager and say, what is this for? Then he says, oh yeah, this is this purchase order. Yeah, this is for this. Can you cost code it? So can you tell me which line items actually map to this invoice? And then, did we receive all of that? So a lot of the kind of steps all in between, and all the steps are manual. So from the foreman kind of calling the office or sending out a paper form to the purchasing staff that's going and getting quotes and then entering the purchase order, to the invoice that goes and gets received and then cost coded and approved and verified by the PM. And then someone has to enter that invoice, somebody has to pay that invoice. All these things are manual. And so like what we do is we build AI agents that can automate all the steps, like pretty much every single step. So from setting up a purchase order, reading that quote document, or being able to read a text message or a paper form and say, hey, this is requisition. The AI read all the line items, all the quantities, and now it could be either automated as a quote to a vendor or can be set up, pushed as a purchase order into the accounting system. Then, delivery ticket, the agent goes and reads that delivery ticket, marks what has been received. So nobody has to create a spreadsheet and enter all this information. Finally, to the invoice, where the invoice can be downloaded. And again, AI agent can read that invoice, find that PO, find the line items that match to that invoice, verify that everything is correct, cost code it, and then push it into the accounting software. So all the steps that sort of done by manual, data entry verification, we trying to automate all of that so that this mundane and busy work, because nobody likes this type of work, doing the data entry and verification, can be automated by the machine.
How I mean, in such a complex, fragmented, and like multi-step problem, like where do you begin?
Yeah.
So if that's kind of a problem, like how do you, even as a startup, like how do you insert yourself in select?
Yeah, I'll tell you the story even. I'll tell you how we began and how it evolved into what we do, right? Initial problem that we knew that this procurement is so fragmented and there are so many steps that it's not going to be just like one and done. It's not going to be like one module or one quick app that just does all of that. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's take it one step at a time. So first module we built was quoting module. We said, okay, if you get a bill of materials, you need to go and send it to a few suppliers, send out a request for quotes. You get those quotes back, and then you can, or you get it as a PDF, and then how do you convert that into a purchase order, and then and commit to that? That's kind of the first step that we've done, first module. Then we said, okay, that's good, but that's just a slim, layer of this whole pie. And then we said, okay, we need the ordering piece, like ordering meaning that, we need a way to push that order into the accounting software. We need to send it out to the supplier. We need to track the delivery dates in that order. We need to, track what, has been received, So we built the PO module or the ordering module. That was our second module. And once we built that, we said, okay, again, it's another layer to this, but and we already had customers. I mean, when we launched, this was 2023, but again, this wasn't enough. Then we added invoicing because we said if we cannot do the last piece, which is like what is this? Then we added the invoices piece, and then we kind of felt more or less like, okay, we solved a big chunk of it, not all of it, but sold a big chunk of it. So that was kind of our initial core product. But then we started realizing that there's so much more to it. So then we added some more, smaller modules. For example, receipts. Like we said, okay, hey, every once in a while they'll go on a rogue, and they go and buy something from Home Depot, Lowe's, or a local supply house. How do we capture those purchases and tie it back into the bill of materials, into the WIP reports? And, so we build that. Then we added inventory module because we said, okay, when a request for materials comes from the field, we need to know, what do we have in the warehouse right now, or did we receive some materials already for this job? How do we track this? So we added inventory module. Then we added the prefab module. So we said, okay, now maybe some of these components could be fabricated off-site. So we added prefab module. And finally, more recently, we added the pricing intelligence as well. So we said, okay, now if you buy in all these different materials, can we track how much of each material you bought across all the different jobs? What was the price? How did this price change throughout the time? And can you either bulk buy some of the things, like say, hey, if I'm buying, across 10 buildings I'm building now, can I buy this, in bulk across all of them? Or can you optimize the time when you buy? Like, for example, we observed that if you buy materials in spring, you can actually save a lot more than if you go and wait until summertime to purchase them. So things like that. And obviously, all throughout this process, we've been lucky almost like to launch the company in 2022. Not launch, but at least the company was founded in 2022. The product was launched in 2023. And ChatGPT came out right at the end of 2022. And the big realization we made early on is that AI is going to be a big component in all of that, because we didn't want to build a better mousetrap, just like, hey, here's a mobile app that lets you select items and order them. That's great, but that's 2012 or 2013. Like that's what, kind of what you did with Procore, some of the project management software. We said, how can we build it AI native, where it's like, all right, I can just dictate what I need to order and it reads it, or I can send a text message and then the agent can read it, or I can send you a form, or I can send you a quote and it just will figure out what is what. That's the whole idea. How can you make it AI native? And because we've been lucky to launch the company around the same time when LLMs really came out, and we started building this in an AI native format all along, and building AI at its core in every single module of everything that we do.
Wow. So in this case, somewhere I read that between solving this fragmented process, you guys have scaled to 1.3 billion. And
yeah, we just announced it. Yeah, we actually, to my surprise, it seems like we're accelerating even in terms of our growth. We just hit more than even 1.3 billion in total purchase volume. So basically, that means on our platform right now,
well,
more 1.3 billion is being purchased every year, which is quarterly, more than 350 million every quarter. And that's sizable. I mean, at the grand scheme of things, like when we think about the whole market, like, we estimate US commercial material purchasing to be about 300 billion. So like we're just, a small drop in the ocean. But for me, it's exciting because it's a massive scale of projects that are using us and leveraging to automate all the steps.
so maybe for someone just listening kind of for the first time, use field materials, what's the experience like? What's kind of who's kind of the person opening up the platform? And maybe what's the business model, just so I understand? Is it a subscription? Is it kind of like a pay per
Hmm.
purchase?
Yeah.
How can I understand that?
Yeah. So you have, at its surface, it's simple. You have a mobile app in the hands of a field worker, a foreman, for example. That mobile app is simple. It allows you to either request specific items from the office or from the supplier. So like, hey, I need XYZ materials. Maybe it's inventory materials, maybe simply saying, I don't know where to get them, but I just need those materials. Or it's the mobile app to capture delivery tickets. So every time the material gets delivered to you, whether it's a like 57 stone or reprep, if I'm a civil contractor, or it's a plumbing, let's say, order. Every time you get a delivery, you'd snap a picture of that delivery ticket. So you have the mobile app in the hands of a foreman. You also can reserve a PO through the mobile app. And then you have a desktop app, which is a web-based app in the hands of a purchaser or the accountant department. So, or also project managers would use that. The desktop application allows them to many times, do things like requesting quotes from suppliers, or it allows them to review the order request that comes from the field, the requisition comes from the field, review the delivery tickets that are coming through that have been read by AI and kind of scanned in, or just process the invoices. So you have the desktop component, which is the web-based application, and you have a mobile app in the hands of a field staff. And then that's sort of how it works. And then the pricing is all based on its SaaS pricing, based on tiers based on the number of modules you use, number one. And the second piece is based on the number of transactions we process. So depending on how many invoices, how many orders you actually process in through our platform, you get slotted to a specific tier, and then based on that tier, there's a monthly subscription.
Yeah. What would you attribute some of the drivers? I mean, that massive growth is insane. I appreciate things that have been impacting the industry, or things like the tariffs and some of the construction boom and other sectors. Like why the massive explosion?
I personally attribute this, while early on there was a little bit of maybe impact, maybe in 2022 when we were starting out, there was some interest in this field because of COVID, because of shortages of materials that we were experiencing. But most recently, right now in 2026, the biggest driver for that, honestly, are just massive infrastructure projects, massive data center and infrastructure projects that are coming in, and from the big tech giants, because those projects are, first of all, have massive scale, like just, massive big data centers, or it's some sort of massive energy facilities. Number one. Number two, they have very aggressive deadlines. Like they have very aggressive schedules where it's like, okay, we have to build this massive data center in like 18 months, let's say, whatever that is, 24 months. And because of the scale and because of deadlines, contractors are realizing, man, I cannot be operating with pen and paper. I cannot be operating with just a spreadsheet or humans kind of answering this information. So I need some automated means. I need AI agents to automate all the data entry, verification steps, all these things that we automate. And that drives them to come in and say, hey, I need a procurement platform. I really need a centralized way to do all these things, automate all these things. And that's the biggest driver right at this moment. But like I said, it could change overnight. So, I mean, tariffs are also a little bit of influence. So sometimes customers come and say, I need more insight into what's happening to my prices across all the different projects I'm doing, and can I get economies of scale? But I would say that the data center boom is a little bit the bigger driving force.
If I'm not mistaken, I was reading up on some of your background, and before construction, you were actually selling kind of like AI within like retail.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
What's the difference between selling into retail merchandising and, say, a construction foreman? Like literally, what's the sales pitch? Are you having to start on a project and then somehow build that trust there and expand? Like, what does that look like?
No, I mean, I can compare and contrast. I mean, two industries very different, actually. When we built software for retail, and we've been pretty successful. I mean, among our customer bases, when I built my first startup for retail, we had eBay, Nordstrom, Williams-Sonoma, Uniqlo. Like we had a lot of big retailers using us on a daily basis. We're processing, I think, on the order of tens of millions of page views and requests per day with that platform. But anyways, what's different about selling to them was it's a very kind of corporate way of selling into that sector. You have a lot of times those RFP, or maybe you come into the office, kind of executives, VPs, EVPs, present the platform and sort of like do all the usual stuff. Selling to contractors is very different, obviously. A lot of times it's while those are not like SMBs, traditional SMBs, but more like a traditional contractor would be, maybe 40 people, 40 people in the office, 100 plus maybe in the field. A lot of times it's a family business, family run. Maybe it's, 3 generations back. But at the same time, people are very much more down to earth. Like you could, much more approachable. They're not corporate. They're like, So I find selling into construction, first of all, they're much more approachable and much almost like, almost fun to deal with personally. But how do we sell? we didn't sell project by project. So like usually the problem is, so like, yes, they might say we're going to start this platform on this new 2 3 projects because like this is a big data center project, we want to really use the platform. But very quickly, most of the time they say I need this across my entire company, because I will get a, let's say if I have my purchasing department that's buying all the materials, it's weird to come to them and say, hey, only on this job, you're going to be using this AI platform to automate things. But on 10 other jobs, you're going to be still doing the data entry. Like that would feel weird, right? So like,
Right.
that's why most of the time when we come, it ends up being like, hey, let's do it for all the projects, even if it's like maybe first month on one job. So like it's a in that sense, we sell it into the whole thing. But outside of that, I would say, I find it much more fun to sell into, the construction sector, because I feel like I'm talking to real humans, family run businesses that much more approachable, and there is a lot more human factor to that.
Right, right, right. You're on the front lines of building what will be becoming a standard in procurement. In 2 years from now, like what does this process look like from where we began here? Like what in terms of speed, in terms of cost, like what does this mean for folks looking to adopt a better way?
I think 2 years, what it's going to look like, and we're right now building a lot of this out, is that a lot of it will become agentic, meaning that the way I think about it is some of the things where right now you have, let's say you call the office and you tell them, hey, I need XYZ material. What it's going to look like 2 years from now is that you're gonna direct that message to an agent. An agent will take your message, whether it's a voice that you provide, like sort of a voice message, or it's going to be a text based. It's going to attempt to solve your problem. Like, hey, I'm going to get materials for you. May come back with some questions, message you back and say, hey, I can do this. Does this work for you? I got a quote like this, or I'm going to substitute this material for this other material that's coming from the inventory. Is that okay? You're going to say yes, and then you're going to solve your problem. And it runs into an issue, it may pin a human and say, hey, someone in the office, like the actual purchaser in the office, say, hey, I'm having trouble with this. Can you help me with this? But a lot of it will be automated by agents, not just reading stuff from the documents, but the actual steps. The same way with, maybe accounts payable side of things, where, if the invoice comes in and it matches the PO and we verified that all the line items have been received, it can quickly go and process it. Or maybe the invoice comes and the agent sees this invoice has a 5% discount if we paid in the next 10 days. It goes and prioritizes that invoice, gets it approved, routes it to the appropriate person, and then does all the work. So that's how it's going to look like. It's a lot of the work will be done by the agents, where humans will be looped in only when necessary. So it's like, hey, I'm having trouble with this, help me out here. Or hey, I'm going to do this, are you okay with this? And that's how the world is going to operate. This way we're going to drive a lot more efficiency, like just from the entire process. So instead of, let's say, requiring, I don't know, 500 man hours every month to do this work, you're going to go down to 100 man hours, and then the other portion will be done by the agents. And then I think contractors will also be smarter about how they buy materials, at what prices they buy materials, when they buy materials, optimize the time when they purchase, optimize in what quantity they buy, who they buy from. And because right now it's very much manual, maybe, but I think a lot of that could be, we could maximize the margins a lot more for the construction industry just by being smarter at how these materials are purchased and at what prices they're purchased.
Super interesting, super interesting. Eldar, I think you have the benefit of hindsight now that you've been building for a few years and is second time founder. What kind of advice would you give a younger Eldar coming out of maybe a college, now that a variety of different sectors, construction, now obviously in the last few years, what AI has done to just fundamentally reconsider workflows? What would you tell recent grad Elder?
I mean, I don't know if I would do a lot of things differently compared to what I've done. I actually would, I've had to, replay it all together. There are very few things I would have done differently, actually. But the the two pieces of advice I would give to myself and to anyone else that sort of is um is doing entrepreneurship, is a founder, would be, number one, look for major trends. So I'll give you two examples from my real life. Two major trends. Number one was iPhone. I'll give you a short story that I think listeners will enjoy.
Yeah.
in 2008, iPhone 2, I believe, came out. I was a Stanford grad student. I was like, I think I was a first year PhD student back then. And I literally took a week. So I took a week off to just, hey, I'm going to build an iPhone app. And the iPhone app was stupid. Okay. Very, 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 very simple. I had a real problem. I'm like, I'm on campus, I have a bike, and I always forget where I park it because, I could be, I cannot find a spot here. So I'm going to park it on that side. I'm going to have on that day I park it somewhere else. And then I come out of the building. I'm like, where's my bike? I'm like, I need an app that will remember where I parked it because this was the first iPhone that came out with GPS. So I'm like, you just open the app. It remembers the location where you parked it. And then it tracks how much you parked it for how long, and you could remind you, to feed the meter or do whatever you want. And I built this iPhone app that it was called Take Me to My Car, literally back then. And that app just like took off like crazy. I had like a top 50 most downloaded iPhone app in 2008. No kidding. And I had like, a bunch of like, New York Times, I believe, like a bunch of big media outlets were writing about this app. Like they were saying top 10 apps you should download for your phone. I was getting emails from customers saying like, "Hey, I have a kid that really, the icon for the car is red. He says our car is blue. Can you customize the color of that icon?" So like stuff like that was happening. I had like 2 million users within a span of like 2-3 months. I don't know, and that's
Crazy.
a trend. That's a big wave. Like, I've never experienced anything like that. At the time, and there was no marketing dollars. There was nothing, no distribution, like no sales, and that's a big trend that was happening, and you could ride that trend. Right now, AI is the same trend. Like we are going through a major transformation where it's like the same way that personal computing or internet went through, where it's like we're changing the way we build software, we're changing the way we work as office workers or as any industry workers, and look for those trends. That would be my advice to myself and to any founder, of a college age, let's say. Look for major trends and look for ideas and things that you would do that are basically with that trend. Because if you can do something that actually fits into the trend and into that distribution, you have a successful business right there. That's number one. And number two, I would say just more general advice I would give myself is be adaptive. Like, at the end of the day, don't have a fixed mindset on anything. Like, yes, you have to have a vision for something. You have to have a view on how the world is going to develop.
Right.
But be adaptive because like no single assumption is going to be 100% correct. You're going to have do something, you're going to iterate on it, you're going to see some feedback, and you're going to adapt and you're going to change. And as long as you're adaptive, as long as you listen into and adapt into what you're seeing, you're going to be successful with the product you end up building.
What on this most recent point you made, what do you think that wave is today? I mean, of course, AI is a tsunami, but when you double click into AI and like all the kind of various components that it's impacting, what is that wave today? Or maybe a wave that you're paying attention to that's massively growing?
Well, like for example, one wave that I think is just not so much the specifically about AI, but it's more like physical world. So
Right.
data center is one wave. I think the next big wave that's coming, that's industrial wave, is energy and infrastructure. So like, when I think about construction, I'm just thinking about it. Okay, we're building a lot of data centers, but like the next big wave that's coming now is like new, nuclear reactors, new massive energy sources that could be deployed quickly, and how we can generate energy, how we can deliver energy quickly. And then also even the grid dynamics, like, for example, like, hey, we're so used to the fact that everyone wakes up, they use energy during the day, nighttime energy goes down, or nighttime energy goes up a little bit. Now imagine more spiky energy. You have a data center that goes online, all of a sudden gets unplugged, and all of a sudden, boom, 10% of power is consumption, or even not 10, maybe it's like 50% of power consumption is gone overnight. Can you model that? Can you deal with that? Can we
Mm.
operate in this new world? So this is an example of more of a physical world trend that is not obvious, but if you just kind of look a little bit farther ahead, you can like say, okay, can I build a company around this new evolution? Like if the world is evolving towards that, what does it, if, and the world looks like in this, like with the grid dynamics, where like, it's not like a bunch of small consumers consuming, waking up, going back, going back to sleep. Now we're talking about more like big consumers sucking lots of energy all at once, and then sometimes getting unplugged, going offline. Can we operate in this world? And that's sort of like that's sort of the mindset I would have.
Right. Eldar, this has been really fun. For those that want to follow your journey of field materials, how do they reach you? How do they work with you?
Yeah. So the best way I would say I tend to be pretty vocal on LinkedIn. So if you find me on LinkedIn, my first name, last name, and follow me. I like to make a post at least every week, just commenting on general trends or my observations as a founder, as an entrepreneur. LinkedIn is one. Yeah, and if you have something personal, you just reach out to me. Go to our website, fieldmaterials.com, to find out more, or fieldmaterials.ai. Yeah, that's probably the best way.
Awesome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Jose.